You have busy lives, you're here to have some fun, we're gathering after a long period of time. But I want you to play along with me so we can engage with each other. Obviously, we're all people from different parts of the world. I myself came to the US some 36 years ago with very little but dreams just like you. But the one thing I did realize was the best way to stay motivated is to learn to communicate with others and with yourself. So raise your right hand for me like this. Right hand like this. Finger, okay? Now bring it down slowly and put it on your chin. So for those of you who missed, the chin is this pointed thing at the end of the face. And I know I have my work cut out for me. All of you are in very high powers of communication. All of you heal. All of you teach. All of you do wonderful things. But you missed something very basic. You heard what I said, but you did what you saw. The number one rule of motivation is, as individuals, we react to that which we see instead of respond to that which we believe. Reaction is based on permissibles. Response is based on possibles. So turn to the person on your left and say, I think you're amazing. Yeah. Now turn to the person on your right and say, I'm glad you're facing facts. It's been said that every third person in this world is either amazingly beautiful and unusually bright, incredibly handsome, and off the charts brilliant. When you look to either side, you realize it wasn't either one of them. From this moment forward, think of yourself as that third person. You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. Now, when I grew up in India, the rule was that if you had two boys, one would be an engineer, the other would become a doctor. Well, my brother's an engineer, so all the pressure was on me to be a doctor. Well, there are only two things I don't like: blood and sick people. I'll have motivated you, you'd still die. I'd have made a horrible doctor. In fact, when they sent me to the medical entrance test, I ran out from the other side. Fast forward many, many years later, I was speaking. A major pharmaceutical company had hired me to speak to a bunch of doctors in Lufkin, Texas. And my father was visiting from India. My father, whose dreams I had shattered because I went down the profession of sales. You know, in India you have that rule, right? If you have an engineering degree and you come back, you get 1 acre of coconut plantation in dowry. If you do an MBBS and come back, they give you 2 acres of coconut plantation. If you foul up like me and do an MBA, they ask you to bring the coconut and work in the plantation. So my father was quite disappointed with me. But that afternoon, after I spoke to about 50 people of very high prominence, internists, general practitioners, specialists, people making money. In fact, one man walked up to me, had alcohol on his breath. He said, I have bought 2 houses and demolished them and built 1 house. I have 3 German cars in the driveway, but my child won't talk to me. And my father saw me connecting with these people on the level of the heart. And when we got into the car that evening, my father put his arm on my knee, and for the first time in his adult life, I saw my father cry. He said, son, there are a lot of doctors, there are a lot of engineers, but there are very few people who practice the art of giving hope. Today I saw something that I never thought I'd see in my life. So in addition to everything we do, I want you to focus on this word hope. And I've created a small presentation. It's called Creating a Winning Momentum. How to be more, do more, and have more. One of the first things I want to share with you is this thing called belief. If you read it, it says, F.W. Borum was a brilliant strategist, essayist, he was a pastor. He said, if man wants to feel that the world is wide and a nice place to live in, he must forever and forever be sampling infinity. He must shun the books he dearly wants to buy and buy the books he would do anything to shun. Now, the reason I wanted you to start with that belief is life, if you want to look at it, to be positive and to be hopeful. We've gone through 2 years of absolute mayhem. But in the 2 years, I noticed something fascinating. Despite the lockdown and the lockup, it is the same 3% of people who are thriving now and the same 97% are miserable. What happened? We went apparently to a great reset. The entire world shut down at the same time. We all had the same opportunity. But when we came out of it, the same people are happy and the same people are miserable. Now, happiness depends on happenings. But joy is undiluted, it's unadulterated, it's pure. Don't hear what I'm not saying. Money is not everything, but it ranks reasonably close to oxygen. When you need it, there is no substitute. Money bought me a house. Actually, it bought me 2, and it's getting ready to buy me 3. But it has never bought me a home with laughter. Money bought me a good time, never peace of mind. Money bought me a companion, never a friend for life. Money bought me a bed, never a good night's sleep. I like the things money will buy. And you can get everything in this world that money will buy without a lick of character. But you cannot get any of the things money won't buy without that character. Character is the ability to have pride in the mundane. The mundane is what we do every day. Whether it is seeing patients or whether it is orchestrating or dealing with the protocols and the bureaucracy, that is a choice we make. Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, it is the learners who will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. Raise your right hand for me as high as it'll go. Now raise it a little higher. Why didn't you do that to begin with? I said as high as it'll go. We all save a little bit for a rainy day that never comes. 97% comfort zone, 3% effective zone. The difference between comfort and effectiveness is called growth. Growth is uncomfortable. So one of the things I want to paint for you is maybe have some fun. But years ago, I read this poem. It was called Gaily the Troubadour. And it was written by a man by the name of Arthur Guiterman. It was written in the 1930s. And maybe it'll resound with you. It said, first dentistry was painless, then bicycles were chainless, then carriages were horseless, and many laws enforceless. Soon cookery was fireless, telegraphy was wireless, coffee was caffeineless, and cigars nicotineless. Then oranges were seedless, the putting green was wheatless, the college boy was hatless, the proper diet fatless. Now our motorways are dustless, our new steel is rustless, our tennis courts are sodless, and our new religion's godless. We have arrived at a place of absolute apathy. Most people wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, do I have a prayer at all? If the mirror ever looked back at you and said, with that kind of face, go back to bed, listen to the mirror. If we walk out in this world looking like the picture on our driver's license, nobody's going to treat you like a glamour shot. If you're happy, tell your face. Now don't hear again what I'm not saying. I'm not saying walk around grinning from ear to ear like you've eaten a banana sideways. That's insanity. But at least a little pep to our step, a little bounce to our ounce. But everywhere I go in this world, the most miserable people I meet are the wealthiest. They have everything, but they're unhappy because they're constantly searching for new ends to justify their means. But you know, we all came from impoverished backgrounds. When I look at the origin of your own association, when you look at where we came, I've done tons of work in Africa. I do pastors' conferences every year in Kenya. Just came back from South Africa. I've been to Zimbabwe. I've been to Ghana. I've been all over the place. I've been to 75 countries on 6 continents. And the one thing I realized that changed is, it's not where you are that makes a difference. It's who you want to be where you are that makes the difference. It's time for us to look in the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, here I am, what's my call? Folks, don't look at a mountaintop if you want positivity. Look back to the villages and the locales we came from. Bring enough people to where you are, and on those shoulders, they'll take you to the mountaintop. The food you eat on the mountaintop only grows in the valley. Nothing grows on the mountaintop. But somehow this convoluted thought process has created misery. The other day I was speaking somewhere and one person came up to me and says, Mr. Dhanam, I'm really struggling in my marriage. I said, what's that got to do with anything? He says, do you have any marriage advice? I said, yeah, marriage is grand. Divorce is 100 grand. And some people find out the hard way. Someone asked me one time, I said, you know, I don't agree with my wife all the time, but if she ever leaves me, I'm going with her. And I can tell you without any fear of error, even though with all the health issues my wife has had, she looks prettier to me than she did on our wedding night. You know why? I see a forgiven and a redeemed woman, but more importantly, when you look at togetherness and you stand next to each other looking in the same direction, there's a new kind of hope that emerges. But we're all frustrated because we're trying to eke out an existence by demotivating ourselves every day. Let me give you an illustration. There was a man, he wanted to be a doctor, but he never became a doctor. So one day he decided that he was going to go to a village where he grew up and tell everybody that he had become a doctor. So he put up a sign outside his building and it simply said, Dr. Geezer. Geezer just means old man. He said, if I can cure you, it'll be $500. If I can't cure you, I'll give you $1,000. That was all his sign said. Now, he's not a real doctor. He had a person working for him who was not a real nurse. But one day, a skeptic came into him. You know, they're always, some people are so narrow-minded, they look through a keyhole with both eyes. They said a narrow mind and a fat head usually come on the same body. So this narrow-minded person went up to the doctor, who's not a doctor, and said, Doc, I've been losing my sense of taste. And the doc said, oh, that's easy. Nurse, not a real nurse, go in the back to bottle number 22 and get 2 drops of the liquid and put it in the patient's mouth. As soon as she did that, this fellow said, oh my God, that's petrol. He said, congratulations, you got your taste back. That'll be $500. Now realizing that he had been conned, the man waited a month and went back to the doctor and said, Doc, I'm losing my memory. The doc said, that's easy. Nurse, go to bottle number 22 and bring 2 drops of the liquid and put it in the patient's mouth. He says, oh no, you don't, that's petrol. He said, congratulations, you got your memory back. At which point the person realized that, okay, this guy is very smart, even though he's not a real doctor, but I'm going to wait a while. This is human condition. We think the problem will change if we just wait a while. It doesn't. Malcolm Muggeridge said there are no new rules, there is no new news, it's just old news happening to new people. Well, this guy goes back about 2 months later and he says, Doc, I'm losing my sight. And the doc says, I don't have a cure for that. Here's your $1,000. He said, that's only $500. Congratulations. You got your sight back. So, the reason I share that is, just look. I started speaking about 10 minutes ago, 12 minutes ago, and right now you're laughing and you're comfortable. Do you think it's because I put something in the seats? Or it's because I said something here that give you that internal jogging? See, the brain cells, and you guys who've studied medicine know this, at the end of those neuroreceptors, those neurotransmitters, we have that internal jogging mechanism that releases the dopamine, the serotonin, and the norepinephrine. Just for a total stranger giving you some information that went in here and gave you that internal jog, you became a little more motivated. That's what motivation is. Motivation is a motive for action. The question is, whose motive is it? If you're asking somebody to do something good for you so you'll look good, that's manipulation. But if you're doing it because it's genuinely good, that's motivation. My mentor and hero was a man named Zig Ziglar. Let me just put these up here. I remember when I went to work for him, I was a young immigrant from India. I'd come to America at that time with $9 to my name. When I started working for him one day, I said, Mr. Ziglar, can I do what you do? Which I'm doing now. I do 120 events a year. I've been all over the world. He said, son, sign this blank piece of paper. Now think about it. I grew up in a country, India, which is the most negative country in the world. We got 1.2 billion people in India. Everybody is doubting everything. And the reason I know that was even our good Lord sent Thomas the doubter to India. Where else would you send a doubter to a place everybody doubts? Well, the first thing is, why am I going to sign a blank piece of paper? But I trusted him. Francis Fukuyama, who wrote a book on trust, said, I will tell you and allow you to gauge the prosperity of a nation if you will show me how trustworthy its people are. That's why the place in the world that has the highest happiness index is the small, tiny country of Bhutan. We have bigger countries that are more prosperous, most miserable people on the planet. Everybody walking around wondering, you know, if you come to America and wherever in the West you travel, Canada even, you'll realize one thing. Everybody is walking around looking like the cruise director for the Titanic. Like someone's licked all the red off their candy. And we're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to have it all. But I've been to parts of the world where people have nothing. There's a slum in India where I support a small church, and there's this little girl with the church that we work with bought her because her father sold her for the equivalent of $100 for a drug habit, and the church bought that girl and is raising that girl. This girl will never get out of that slum. And yet every time I go there with her dust-caked face, she's got that beautiful angelic smile. She holds my little finger and in Hindi she says, Babuji, aap fir se aaye. Kind sir, you came again. Trust. Here are the questions I want to ask yourself on perception. Who are we as a people? Any investigative journalist will tell you this. If you want to build a good story for your life, understand who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who are we? I've never forgotten my roots. In fact, my bio simply says, born in rural South India. I've never forgotten my roots. I go to India 5 times a year. When I land in India, I don't try to act like some guy who's come back from the West. I was telling Norman, my friend, that last night. When my mother passed away, I went to the grocery store, I went to the store to buy all the supplies. You know, when I lived there, I had no money to my name. Now if I go back and convert a few dollars, it's a big wad. Your wallet begins to bulge at the seams. You know what I'm saying. And I walked into that store with a list of all the things we needed for the funeral of my mother and the supplies for the morning. And as the guy billed the whole thing, for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the bill. And I opened my wallet and I wanted to pay, and the guy looked at me and he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm paying. He said, son, you're not that big enough in this town yet. In this town, all you need in this store is your father's name. A good name worth more than silver and gold. Who are we? You know, my father studied under a streetlight to get out of college. One day, like you, I was speaking to him at a seminar in Hyderabad, India, and my 75-year-old father stood up and asked me a question. He said, is there hope for me? I said, Pop, when your obligations to others finish, your obligations to your dreams remain. And at the age of 75, my father went back to college. At the age of 83, he got his PhD. My mother was a child bride. She was married to my father at the age of 14, brother at 17, me at 19. What chance did she have? But my father encouraged my mother to start going back to school, and before she died, my mother got her master's degree. Now you're probably thinking, man, you come from a family of very slow learners. But I'll never forget that day in that town. The same boy who had never become a doctor, now with 2 honorary doctorates to his name, was being introduced in the university. The same university that would never have had me as a student. The banner simply said, Dr. Dhanam and Dhanam. The real doctor is my father. He earned his. Mine is just honorary. But they asked my father, would you mind introducing your son? No matter how much money you make in this world, no matter how much your position is in the world, no matter how high you rise in your profession, there is no greater honor on earth than a father introducing his son. My father got up and said, "My son is my hero." And today, I don't want to take up much time from his talk because I still learn from my boy. See, life, who are we as a people? When you perfect the ripples in your life, the tsunamis will take care of themselves. Don't expect the end of the process while still in the middle of the process. We walk around pretending it's all good. Folks, if you put one foot in boiling hot water and the other foot in ice cold water, on average you're miserable. You're not balanced. So this rhetoric we hear outside is nonsense. Most of the people who bloviate on the evening news, I tell people, I read the newspaper every day, I read my Bible every day. That way I know what both sides are up to. But Tony Evans from Dallas said, let's stop walking around trying to define a heaven we can't prove and do something about the hell on earth. Have you ever stopped at the corner and asked someone else, why are you grieving? Emerson said, if you're going to pull me up, you better be on higher ground. Coach Joby Harris said, otherwise the day will come when by the sheer weight of our numbers, we will drag you down. Mediocrity and misery do love company. How do you get to that 3%? You get to that 3% by simply asking yourself some very basic questions. Not what is, but what else can be. Jan McBarron was an overweight nurse, chain smoked a lot, drank a lot. One day she came to one of our goal-setting seminars and set a decision. I'm going to go back to school. She went back to school to become a doctor. Now, working full-time as a nurse, she became a doctor full-time. That's like going Everest backwards. She and her husband, Duke, would never meet at night because he was running a day business, she was studying at night. She qualified and became an MD in bariatrics at that time in the state of Georgia, specializing in weight management and weight loss. But when they interviewed Jan McMahon and said, what is your greatest accomplishment? It was not becoming a doctor. It was not having a successful practice. She says, my greatest joy is teaching the functionally illiterate how to read. Every time I pick up one person, teach them to read, and pick up someone else. You'll never find that true happiness. Like I said, my mentor, Mr. Ziglar, used to say, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. But that has to be a philosophy. It cannot be a tactic. On my way to school, on my way to the office in the morning, I used to stop at a corner grocery store to get a cup of coffee. There was a young man there from Cameroon, fellow immigrant like myself of many years. One day I asked him, his name was Michael. I said, Michael, what are your dreams? Oh, Mr. Krish, I want to be on day shift. I said, dude, I consult with Fortune 500 companies. I can get you on the day shift. And I started giving him information. Everything I was learning, I was giving him that information. And one of the principles I taught Michael was, if you're irreplaceable, you're unpromotable. If nobody else can do what you do, you're going to be doing it forever. And Michael realized that if he wanted to get on the day shift, he had to find someone else to do the night shift. And one day I came back after about 6 weeks and I said, where's Michael? And there was another guy there from Cameroon. He says, you must be Mr. Krish. Michael, tell me about you. I said, what's your name? He said, Michael. I said, you can't all be named Michael. He said, African name too long, all Michael. 4 years later, I meet Michael. He finds my itinerary. He's now customer service manager for a pharmacy in Houston. He comes to my hotel room and brings with him his beautiful bride and his 2 children. He says, Mr. Krish, thank you for flipping my light switch. He says, we affectionately call the little one at home Krish. Now don't hear what I'm not saying. As a married man, you don't want other people naming their kids after you. Okay, that could put a strain on the marriage. That's not the reason you do it. But the joy in his face of just saying, we have a little bit of your life because one day you took time. That's all. There is a wasting, wanting humanity out there. If you want joy in your life, find someone with a bigger problem than yours. Call Meninger from the Meninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas. Find someone with a bigger problem than yours. Get involved in solving their problem, and yours will go away momentarily. Of course, now in India, there's a new thing. In India, when we were growing up, everybody wanted you to be a doctor. But now the parents are telling them, we don't want you to be a doctor anymore. We want you to be a dentist. And so the kid's going up and saying, how come you want everybody to be a dentist now and not a father? He says, remember, as far as organs are going, all organs just have one, but we have 32 teeth. So there's better option being a dentist. So the kid asked the mother, he says, why do I have to brush my teeth at night? He says, so your teeth don't fall out in the morning. He says, so why do I have to brush my teeth in the morning? He says, so you have friends. So, whom do we credit for who we become? What makes us laugh? One of the things I have realized that is killing hope is political correctness. Political correctness. People walk up to me all the time and say, you're from India, aren't you? What gave it away, Sherlock? Oh, my doctor is Indian. Well, good for him. Do you know him? No, he doesn't know me either. How big do you think my Rolodex is? So I want to give you some things that are slightly different because of the tracking, but I want to teach you how to have fun communicating. Okay? Level 1 in communication is called frivolous communication. Nobody cares. How many of you have teenage kids? Yeah, how many of you are too miserable to talk about it? Okay, well, a few of you. But kids are amazing, especially boys, when they are born. You bring them home and then you put that nice powder on them and they smell good. But when they become teenagers, teenage boys stink. They live in that room, it looks like a pigsty, they don't ever want to come out. When they're kids, it's hard to get them to bed. When they become teenagers, you can't get them out of the bed. Communicating with teenagers is the most miserable thing, and everybody becomes an expert if you just manage to successfully do it. Especially this generation, absolutely clueless. I make a living as a communicator, and a pretty good one. But communicating with my son is like this. Where are you going? Nowhere. I mean, this guy has watched so much Star Wars, he actually thinks there's a place called nowhere. I mean, basic science and metaphysical existence and physiological approval says if you go from here to here, you're there. But he's going nowhere. Wait a minute, it gets better. Who are you going with? No one. He now has imaginary friends. What you going to do? Nothing. So he actually has to go somewhere to do nothing. When you're coming back, don't know. And then the audacity. Pop, can you spot me 20 bucks? Let me get this straight. Let me get this straight. You want to go nowhere with no one to do nothing and not know when you're coming back, and you want me to finance it. I'm not the government. That's what governments do. I play language games. That's why I say the opposite of pro is con. So the opposite of progress has got to be Congress. Well, that's a whole different issue. But that's frivolous conversation. Sometimes in Dallas, I'll be on an elevator, someone will come. Can you believe the heat? Yup. It's July. We've never accidentally had a snowflake here. What are you talking about? Now, we're the dumbest of all people pretending to walk around being the smartest. If we were really smart, our drive-through ATMs would not have their keypad in Braille. If you're telling me that the blind guy is driving to make a withdrawal, I ain't buying it. And if you're with your wife in the car or your significant other in the car, watch the absolute dumbness of human behavior and communication. The wife says, I think we're lost. The husband's adamant he's not. She'll keep insisting that we're lost. And this bright fellow will turn down the radio. Like that has anything to do with direction. Guys, let me give you a great bit of advice in your relationships. If your wife ever walked up to you and held up two outfits and said, which one? You're not smart enough. Run! Don't stand there. that's frivolous conversation. It doesn't go anywhere. Level 2 is factual. We also make mistakes in our communication because sometimes we think people want to hear the facts. They don't. One day I came home and my bride said, apparently I'm the only one in the house who knows how to load a dishwasher. Like a fool, I said, apparently you are. When I took the fork out of my ear and stopped the bleeding. Now that's factual. But the fun begins in level 3, feeling. See, in level 1, nobody cares you're there. In frivolous communication, nobody cares you're there. In factual communication, they just react because you're there. In feeling communication, they respond because you're there. I had the privilege of meeting Mother Teresa in 1994. I asked Mother Teresa, what is success? She says, until you know how much is enough, no matter what you get, it'll never be enough. I know most of us, we're like the good person. We say, Lord, I don't want all of the land, just what's next to mine. Get away from frivolous communication and factual communication. Nobody can harm us if we do. The other day I'm in the Hawaii airport. I've gone to do a presentation for a company. I'm flying back and I'm in the airport in the line and the lady looks at me and says, is Dallas your final destination? I said, no, heaven with my Lord is, but today I'm going to stop off in Dallas. And she looked at me and she says, oh wow. I said, it's the truth. I'm not afraid of the truth. Someone asked me one time, he said, Mr. Dhanam, what do you want said at your funeral? I want the preacher to say, I think he's still moving. Because I've got things to do, I'm not ready to die. But if you ever attended my funeral, I want you to hear a proud husband, loving father. That was a blessing, everything else was a choice. Alexander the Great's tomb said, this space is now enough for whom the world wasn't. At the end of our journey, we get a 6x4 plot. If you are pretty when you die, you get a convertible coffin so someone can come see you. But either way, you get stuck. Worm food. How do we want this journey to end? I want to have had impact. Level 3 is feeling, when people at least respond. Level 4 is fun, fellowship, when people continue to perform because you were once there. When that guy comes to my room in Houston 5-10 years after our encounter saying, because of you, my life has changed. Folks, hear me carefully. One thing I would encourage all of you to do, wherever you went to school, if it was back in the home country or not, it doesn't matter. Find the teachers who painted the vision so you could have the dreams and the aspirations today. Start scholarships in their name in those little schools. The joy that will give you to have another kid reach the pinnacle of glory because someone saw in you the vision of a promise that you didn't see in yourself is unspeakable. It is a great joy. Mrs. Simon, my English teacher, who I have scholarships in her name, she used to paint a picture for me in that little southern Indian town. She would say, why don't you go to the beach? Look at the ships leaving the harbor. Ask yourself which way they may be going. Identify a country, then go to the library. And in the library, because before we had Google and all that, we actually had to, I don't know if you know, library is a big building where you have books. Yeah, okay. So, and then you had to go to the encyclopedia, find out a little bit about that. That's how I studied. I learned American history before I came to America. And it was because of that desire that she painted. She's now old, she's feeble, but I communicate with her daughter on a regular basis. I said, it was your mama's ideas that she painted. Folks, I'm telling you, these are the small things we can do that will make that fellowship work. Because it is not where we are. It is who else can we bring to where we are that they may exalt and be even more glorified. Level 5 is freedom. Freedom is when you don't care what you say because you believe it. When you do this, you learn to live your day by the clock, but your life with a vision. So when you learn to live your day by the clock, but your life with a vision. What is freedom communication? The Reverend Billy Graham was once asked that question. And he says, you know, when I spoke in Seoul, South Korea, there were 1 million people in front of me. It was all over the news. They had to fly on a helicopter to show the amount of people there. He said the irony of ironies was 999,000 were listening to the interpreter because they couldn't understand English. but 1 million came because of me. That's freedom. Some years later, he was in Wembley, England, and a reporter, negative reporter, came up to him and said, Dr. Graham, I think you're a hypocrite. Soon you're going to go into the stadium and talk about how you serve a Lord who came in on a donkey and you came in on a luxury liner. Dr. Graham said, you find me a donkey that'll cross the Atlantic and I'll take it. That's freedom. Freedom is when you don't care what you say, but not because you're arrogant or you're mean. You do it because it's the truth. Truth by nature is exclusive. And one of the reasons we have such hopelessness on the streets of the world today is because of the parade of endless lies being fabricated as truth. People are changing every part of their existence and defying every part of commonality instead of going back to common sense. My father always said, you can scratch your nose this way, you can scratch it this way. Either way you'll get rid of the itch. This way you'll look like an idiot. There's a right and a wrong, a yes and a no, a black and a white, a good and a bad. But one of the things that's eroded hope in our times is the word relativism. It's all relative. People who say it's all relative just have lousy relatives. That's my humble observation. But the second thing is relativism is a crock. A young girl will never come up to you and say, I think I'm relatively pregnant. 9 months from now, she's in for a relative surprise. But we have believed these lies. And as a result of it, we go through this with crooked warp. You know, I fly a lot. I've flown over 5 million miles. When the flight attendant comes on and says, ladies and gentlemen, your seat bottom cushion can be used as a flotation device, that's a lie. She's just saying it. But I'm 35,000 feet in the air and she's just told me that I'm in a plane that's not going to fly, but my seat's going to float? I don't buy it for a second. Then she says, buckle up. And everybody buckles up. 7-seater, 747. But in the car, we won't wear our seatbelt because we're in control. Folks, here's a news flash. Insurance agencies have said that if you're buckled up in your car, 3 in 5, you'll survive. I'm here to tell you, after 5 million miles, I don't care how well you buckled in the air. If something happens to that sucker, you're going to collapse, finish, dead, over. And the reason I tell that to you is common sense is not common practice. I'll end with a story, but before that, before I run out of time, I'd like to thank my dear friend Norman and Rachel and their financial services company that's right outside here that were the ones who brought me here. Hopefully someday we'll be able to share the story of how we met and maintain that relationship. Beautiful Shelley is right here. She'll be at the booth. And I'll be back there as well if you want to come and shake my hand. Or here's my rule. If you disagreed with anything I say, slap the person next to you. I'm sensitive, but I'll know you're upset. We can deal with that later. When I'm finished, some of you will like me because I'll have made you laugh. I'll have given you positivity. Some of you will dislike me. That's okay. There are a few of you who are going to steal my jokes and use them as your own. That's despicable, but I can't do anything about it. But I want to close with an illustration that will probably sum up my attitude towards life. How many of you think that I have fun doing what I do? How many of you are not going to raise your hands no matter what the question? Okay, we know a few of you. One day I was standing outside outside a hotel, waiting for my wife to go get the car. I had just spoken to a small group of people. They came out, and when women dress up, you look amazing. When guys wear a tuxedo, we look like penguins looking for direction. We all look alike. So I'm standing there in my tuxedo after having just spoken for a company as a keynote speaker. And yet the guy does not think I'm a person of importance. Because I'm standing in front of the hotel next to where the cabs are, he thinks I work for the hotel. So he walks up to me and he says, can I get a cab? Sure. Big hotels, you raise your hand, one will come. So I raised my hand, one came, he gave me $1, I put it in my pocket. Another guy came up and said, I'll take one too. Suddenly a line is forming off a group I had just spoken to. Here's the irony, they already paid me for that speech. Now they are paying me for their ignorance. Now I know Then my wife walks up and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "If you're quiet, I think I can get enough money for a good meal." Now that's my attitude. It's an attitude of gratitude. Here's why. My mama named me and she loved me unconditionally. My Lord saved me and He loves me unconditionally. My Father praises me and He loves me unconditionally. My family is mine and they care for me unconditionally. If you don't fall into that circle, you're just part of my wandering generality, and I'll profit by you, by your ignorance, or by your strength. You have to be in that inner circle to absolutely upset me. One last story and then I'm done. Again, I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida. I had just spoken for another big company, a Fortune 30 company, and the shuttle is there. And I noticed that the shuttle driver is running late, so I put my luggage in the shuttle. The lady standing next to me looked like she'd fallen asleep in a salad bar. She had the hat with the whole fruit number working. Looked like Carmen Miranda lost out of a video game. She looks at me and she says, "Can you put my bags in too?" Sure. You just lift it, you put... The guy standing next to her grunts, because obviously I may not speak English, we're in Florida. He says, "Can you put my bags in?" I put their bags in. I'm a capitalist. See, capitalism has always been the uneven distribution of wealth. Communism has always been the even distribution of misery. So I chose capitalism. Socialism doesn't work because Margaret Thatcher said socialism is only good until you run out of other people's money. So after I put their bags in the van, I asked for a tip, very boldly. They gave me some money, I put it in my pocket, I sat in the van, and I flipped my luggage tag over, which has my title. Vice President, Intergalactic, Motivational, Yoda, whatever. The guy now is embarrassed. He says, "Oh my God, I made a horrible mistake." I said, "You're not getting your money back." At which point he said the words that made the story tellable. He said, "I wish all my life and my people had your disposition." What I talked about for the last 43 minutes was just that disposition. People don't care how much we know until they know how much we care about them. They don't care about all our degrees and our laudits and our plaudits. That's our ambition. But until they care about us, until they're able to tell your story to someone else, you've never truly arrived. And I'll close by saying this. I've traveled the world with 7 seas. I've been on my highs and on my knees. But of all the groups I've spoken to, the most humbled I felt is my time with you.